Gears is a cinematic experience in a alternate sci-fi world where it's a blend between high-tech and low-tech. And it's a story of a man's redemption from military traitor to human savior. Or the one line, it's a, third-person action horror shooter.
Gears to me is kind of a action combat game where we really push cover and make the player actually interact with the environment rather than, dance around the enemy.
Gears of War is about fluid in and out of cover, being able to take cover anywhere. The weapons are easy to use. It's very sort of intuitive, and we're finding that with press people and new people coming onto the project that they're able to pick it up and play pretty quickly. And so people are having fun because it's so easy to play. It's ruined me for a couple of games that have come out because they're just so difficult to navigate and play. So I find its simplicity is what makes it different for me.
I think Gears is just a culmination of just amazing craftspeople. Artists, level designers, programmers all coming together in just the coolest way ever to create this visual kind of extravaganza that people see.
Gears is a good opportunity for Epic to branch out and kind of tackle the stereotypes that the company has from our past products and what we've put on shelves before. People think they know what we can do when they really don't. We're evolving ourselves and recreating ourselves on every project, every day.
Gears kind of started off originally as like a very large-scale vehicular-based product, and then eventually when we were able to look at the visuals we were able to do with Unreal Engine 3, we kind of wanted to bring it back down to a much more intimate kind of setting, whereas you actually have a chance to get into close proximity with your foes and kind of, do a curb stop on them or chainsaw them or shotgun their head off and kind of see all this in its bloody glory and actually get to the point where you have blood on the camera and have this kind of intimate violence that we were going for.
Very early on, we had a lot of cool ideas, and it was a lot of work to kind of pick out the cool ones and focus on those and get those far enough along that everybody was sold on it. And at that point, we latched on to a few features and really kept pushing those and iterating on those, and art would come along and make it look awesome, and then everybody's excited about it.
We started branching away from the hardcore tactical angle when we started realizing that to a lot of people what tactical means and boils down to is you're shooting tiny little pixels of dudes who are exposed 500 meters away. And we have these incredible art assets and characters that we want to fill the screen with. And you want to get personal and involved with these creatures. So what we end up doing is we took what we considered the good elements of tactical gameplay, self-preservation and flanking, and we kind of super deformed that and we cram it into a tighter environment where you're playing a tactical game just on a much smaller scale. But the flanking is there, the maneuvering is there, the self-preservation is there, but you're not shooting pixels in the distance and trying to nitpick at people.
We don't really push, a lot of long-range combat, especially, we were reluctant to even put a scope on the sniper rifle because we wanted to keep all the combat really close, especially to see the high detail that went into our characters and also help them, distinguish better from the environments and whatnot, and have the player focused on the combat at hand and not distracted or trying to pick out a tiny little silhouette in the distance.
Well, I think the things that separate Gears, first and foremost, of course, the visuals. The game just looks better than a lot of other games out there. I think the art department's done an extraordinary job of making it familiar yet unique in that area.
The cinematic look of Gears is something that we really focused on early on, even in our kind of early concept art. We decided on a very specific progression of the visuals. You have these anchors, and you feel the progression in the lighting, and you feel the progression in the mood of the piece, and then you layer post-processing on top of that.
The other thing I think that separates it, especially from other shooters, is the fact that it feels more like a gunfight. The fact that these characters dive into cover like they mean it, like their lives depend on it. The fact that they're not like doing this kind of circle strafing dance around each other and jumping in Battlefield. I mean, there's really no jumping in war, right? So you want to keep your head down, not up. So I think that, coupled with the fact that we've done a really, really good job of handling the third person over-the-shoulder camera, so we almost have the best of both worlds of third and first-person shooters.
A lot of people, when they're watching cameras in war movies, are always shaky, and they want to get that in the game, but there's never really been a good opportunity to get that, because you're naturally giving up some of your responsiveness and some of the control of the characters anytime you do that. So by trying to take every opportunity where you can, where you're already sacrificing some control of the character, you might as well throw the awesome camera shake in, etc., so that it's not impacting the gameplay and the character, but they're getting the feel of this war movie. And I think that's one of the reasons that Roadie Run just seems so freaking cool.
I think in the end we came around to something that looks absolutely gorgeous, and not only the cinematics but the gameplay, and the difference between the cinematics and the gameplay is not very much. We've had people on the development side, on the Microsoft side, who have had concerns that people aren't going to be able to tell the difference between the gameplay and the cinematics because there's no visual cue. I mean, it's other than pulling the camera back to a more cinematic angle, it's the quality of the visuals is the same, and both of them are highly cinematic.
I think Gears is the epitome of next gen right now because we have badass artists and some really awesome tech. I think those two things alone is what makes a lot of people interested in this game, and then with the gameplay, hopefully it will be compelling enough for them to stick around. So, yeah, I think we're really pushing the hardware to its limits on all fronts.
It's always been about the monsters for me. I mean, I love the monsters, monster creation, all that stuff. So the art obviously is my favorite part. Seeing that all come together and stuff, and then the monsters secondly, and you know, the combat and stuff like that. I just love to be able to go in and shoot monsters. I mean, that's just great.
Initially, the game kind of started off whereas the cog, the humans, would use, you know, a lot of technology and maybe a couple creatures like dogs or something, and then the locusts would use primarily creatures and maybe some vehicles. And upon really looking at that, we found that the technology, first and foremost, shows off monsters really, really well. Second off, if we're going to go contrast, we might as well go all the way and make sure the cog just use these robots and the locusts use creatures, and so it's more polarizing as far as, you know, organic versus technological. So getting to this point where we had these kind of, you know, mole men from the underground, what would they use? What would be their tanks? What would be their troop transports? All of this, and we just kept going back to big monsters, and big monsters, and ultimately that's what we wound up with.
You know, you have these human soldiers against these monsters, you know, that are of average, normal kind of, you know, maybe 6'5", whatever. They're other soldiers. There are other guys. They're the other team, and that's really cool. It creates a normal combat situation, and then you throw a one-up from that, and it's just like you have a berserker who's 8 foot tall and blind and runs around and tries to crush you. It's like, okay, that's pretty cool too. I mean, that's a nice monster. And then you go one step beyond that, and you have the Brumach, which is, you know, 2 stories tall with cannons strapped to its arm and a guy driving it around. It's like, oh my God, that's even cooler. You know, you have this big monster. And then you got the corpse room. Just like the monsters in Gears are one of the coolest, like just kind of in there. They feel completely integrated. It's not like they're plugged on top and what the hell are these guys doing there? There's as much a part of the experience as anything else. And they feed into the sci-fi nature of it. They feed into the kind of the cool thing that makes Gears just that much more of a unique experience.
One of the cool opportunities you have when you're not dealing with a real world, but you're trying to get, you know, kind of this cool tactical vibe to it that people want, is that you can suddenly mix it up by throwing in, boom, this creature that busts through the wall, and suddenly your tactical hiding behind cover isn't going to do it for you because this creature just charges right through the walls. It's just not going to work. It allows us to add a little more variety by throwing out the rule book on the enemies you're fighting. You're not just fighting guys in World War II helmets just over and over again. You've got individual type guys that you can go and they can climb on the ceilings or they can do cool things. It really opens up the situations that you can put the player in, and it's going to make overall for a much more intense feel to the story.
Yeah, the Boomer is a great example of something that at first there was a lot of complaints when we first tried it. You know, we wanted something a little bit different. You know, this basically a humanoid tank that came at you and was pretty much indestructible. And at first it was just, you know, programmer art to get him in there and somewhat functioning, and everybody absolutely hated him because he could blow you up with one hit. He wasn't balanced. You couldn't tell him apart from any of the other enemies. But yeah, once we got some cool art in there and everybody, we have this gigantic lumbering tank thing coming at you and blowing the crap out of you. It was awesome. So everybody loves him now. I'm guessing I must be way too desensitized because the gore doesn't really seem over the top to me yet. The headshots look awesome, the chainsaw and all that. It's definitely visceral, and it's a lot of fun. It just adds that little extra bit of polish when you get the drop on somebody. It makes it enjoyable for the dude getting chainsawed and the dude doing the chainsawing. So both get to see this nice explosion of blood and chunks and all that fun stuff.
Curb Stomp. Yeah, Curb Stomp is a Cliffism.
I think we're the first game to actually feature what is known as a curb stomp, in which you can take your opponent's heads and crush them on the pavement with your boot. And I'd pay $50, $60 for that. Or $70.
That's awesome.
Now that the effects and the characters can really support these up-close cameras where you see the chainsaw and the blood hitting the screen, it just makes it so much cooler and more impactful on the player to be filling the screen with that kind of detail. It's awesome.
One of the things that seems to be really resonating, which I find is really interesting, is that the violence of chainsawing and the violence of curb stomping and the amount of blood and the amount of jibbing or giving, whatever, is something that people are latching onto, and they find it exciting that we're not candy coating stuff and we're not neon colors and soft. It's like there's a dirtiness to the world, there's a grittiness to the characters, there's a grittiness to the art, and there's a grittiness to the gameplay. This notion of, well, I can go up and put my foot on the back of somebody's head and smash it into the ground to finish them. Like, there's just this rawness to it that people are really latching onto, and that's what I think is so exciting about why it feels so unique, is that nobody's sort of owned up to, we're just going to be dirty and raw.
Where are we going? Embry Square. Colonel Hoffman's waiting for us. Hoffman? Oh, shit. This is gonna be awesome.
When you're building what is to be a compelling single-player experience of the story arc of where these guys are going and what they're experiencing and what they're going through, the biggest concern was pacing, as far as the player getting a good lump of combat and then taking that lump of combat and switching it up with putting Krill in the scenario and then introducing a new enemy such as the Wretches and kind of allowing the player to enjoy the core combat loop of cover gameplay and then taking it away from him and having him drive a vehicle or go into a section where he's exploring and finding cog tags and whatnot. Just keep changing the pacing as the storyline kind of builds and builds and builds to its epic climax. So you want to have good pacing so that hook is in the player's mouth and you're constantly reeling them along and making sure it feels like this kind of roller coaster ride start to finish, so that they do finish the game, because ultimately we do want people to finish the single player campaign.
Well, multiplayer was a surprise for everyone. I mean, we were actually arguing about not bringing multiplayer to E3 because at the time it was seen by the team who was too close to it. It felt too simplistic.
But at the same time, we found that multiplayer in the Gears universe with the whole cover dynamic is a lot of fun, a lot more fun than I think a lot of people were expecting. And so once we got that up and running and people kind of found how much fun it was to play, we started pushing it more and more.
We had a lot of bad maps originally when we were just trying to find what exactly makes multiplayer fun. And when we finally started hitting on kind of an open feel with rows of cars in a street where you can see the enemies and you can make sure if this guy's going to flank me, I can see that guy flanking me. He's not just going to magically appear next to me. And the moment we started opening this stuff up, it became a game. It was just night and day over the early just random buildings that we had been mimicking more from first-person shooters of other types of genres that we really hit on, and we could find that we had something cool and different because we could make these environments that probably wouldn't have worked very well in other games, but for us, they're perfect and they provide the player a new experience. We meshed out an old level that was one of our early prototypes of an open level. A bunch of art love went into lighting, banging and polishing on it, and we pretty much pulled together the multiplayer map for E3 that was wildly successful by all press comments in about 8 days. It was wild.
But the things like Down But Not Out and the reviving and the weapon field and the map and the roadie run and the weight of the characters and getting in and out of cover and just the way the entire game felt was so unique that you didn't need, crazy game mechanics like, double flips or anything like that. It was enough that what was there was interesting. And you've got something new here, and it's like that was shocking to me that that's how people were interpreting it. That the feel of the game outside of we need to come up with crazy stuff, that just taking basic movements and making them intuitive and making it easy to get in and out of cover and giving a weight to that. Like we slam into the door and the weight of the characters moving, the camera movement. That was enough. The people just. That kind of gameplay with those kinds of controls and feelings it made it a totally unique experience. And so we walk away from E3 with best online multiplayer game of show, and you're like, oh crap, we better look, we got to put some more effort into this.
They get a multiplayer experience that's out of this world, a single player experience that's beyond what they've played before, and be able to go in there and fight monsters with your buddies is something I'm looking forward to.
When you look at the team that is building the product and the universe that Gears is comprised of, I think we have very carefully selected talent, not just with the art staff, but with programming, with design. We have people that have enough experience in the industry and they're fans of sci-fi, but as much as they can appreciate certain characters and designs that are in sci-fi, we kind of want to put our own branding on it and our own stamp on it. And I think that's come through in the final product, from the nuances of how the environments kind of play out pacing-wise from the level designers, and also to just the art style and direction, to the responsiveness of the characters and the way they move. I think it's all kind of perfectly come together.
We have everybody touching levels now. We have the levels shelled out. We have artists who are doing lighting passes. They're way too complex now to have just a sole person who's responsible for a level. Currently, I don't think you could point to a single level in the game and say, that's that person's level. We find the right person to do the particular task on a level. You got people who are awesome lighters, you got people who can do ridiculously good gameplay scripting, you got people who are going to do better at every little aspect of it. And you want to mix it up and get the benefit of all the expertise.
We've got a great art team. We've got, from the top down, I think we've got great art direction, we've got great leadership, and we've got great bunch of guys that can produce the assets that just make it look amazing. And technology-wise, the tech is unbelievable. UE3, the tools, the engine, the lighting, all that stuff comes together along with the talent to make an exceptional looking game. I think everyone's a detail freak. We've got a lot of guys on there with high poly backgrounds and stuff, and they just like to go nuts with the detail, textures, high poly models, things like that. And then some of the products that came out while we were in development, like ZBrush and Mudbox and stuff like that, are just allowing them to go nuts with detail, where they were kind of limited before with some of the apps that they used. Now the sky's the limit, and they use it to the full extent, I guess.
And early on, we thought that, well, this is insane. This is silly to be building them at this kind of level of kind of clarity and of quality, but it's showing through. And the beauty of Unreal Engine and Next Gen is that all this artistry that's put into these pieces actually shows up. So detail is so important. God is in the details, and it comes down to not having anything. Again, it's not betraying the experience to the viewer. We don't want the things that give away the fact that this is a real-time generated scene. We don't want flickering. We don't want Z fighting. We don't want particles that clip through the ground. We don't want characters that pop in their animations. All of those things take you out, and you sit there and go, okay, well, this is a game. And if we can get rid of all that and really make sure every detail is covered, then people are going to just be totally, just insanely engulfed in this experience.
The team here is awesome. I mean, I think that was the funny thing about the E3 special was, they came looking for all this drama, and this team doesn't have that. I mean, this team works together really well, and it's having a team of leads, which is I kind of feel is truly a team of peers, and where everybody values their opinion even outside of their discipline. So it's kind of interesting to have, the ability to share art opinions or gameplay opinions, and likewise in other areas from other people. And so the passion of the team, the fact that everybody works well together, that we have the same goals for the game, I mean, it all makes a really strong team to me.
be Alpha. Dog tags are gone.
Well, Marcus is the main character, so what you do is cast the main guy and kind of figure out what his voice is going to be. When you're playing a game like this and you hear a lot of dialogue off screen, you need the voices to kind of contrast and play off of one another really well. So when we were initially looking at these guys, we're like, wow, these guys all look badass. They all need to have badass voices. And then the more we thought about who Dom was, and we thought about who Baird and Gus were, the more we realized we needed contrast there. So Dom really does sound like a guy who can hold his own, but he's also sounds like your best friend, right? Baird kind of sounds like the bastard he is, and Gus is just, the big kid involved in everything. And you can take one random sound file from the game of a character and match it up to the character that they're playing, and it works out really well from that end.
Control, this is Delta. No resonator.
What do you
yet.
think?
Alpha Squad.
What do I
resume
think?
dead. Over.
Could be Alpha, or it could be the Locust setting a trap.
Location.
There's only one way to know for sure.
Well, I mean, Marcus is the key character, obviously, and John DiMaggio plays a fundamental role in establishing that character. John is the third voice for Marcus, and we tried to go different routes, and we tried to be anti-cliched, if that's such a way to phrase that. But I'm trying to find the everyday hero, and we ended up overshooting that, and it didn't sound like a person you cared about who would be this ultimate, savior of the humanity. And John's ability to bring a depth to his voice, but also a realism to his voice. That was the nice thing about our cast, is when we went through all the characters, it was like, except for maybe one or two instances, everybody's doing a slightly altered version of their natural voice, and so all the acting and all the lines sound natural, and none of it sounds forced because they're not doing cartoony voices.
Control, this is Delta. We have visuals on Alpha. Possible KIA. No sign of resonator.
Oh yeah? Then you can sit next to Marcus.
Hold your fire, Delta. Standard weapons won't work. Do you still have the Hammer of Dawn?
A berserker. Quiet! She can hear us. She can smell us. Deploy a King Raven ASAP. We need that data for the warhead.
Oh man, we don't have to split up again? I'm starting to think you don't like me.
Finding textures of voice was important, like finding Min, who was a little bit higher pitched and a little bit more straight-laced, and finding Dom, who had a little slight Hispanic tone to him, which is really great about Carlos, is that we were trying to figure out how to mutate his voice, and in fact, when he talks to you, he talks exactly like we wanted, which is pretty normal, but the occasional Hispanic flair when he got a word that was sort of that way. And so it was just finding the differentiating pieces, and I think, there's some places where I wish we could have done maybe better if we'd heard them more as a ensemble cast all at once. I think we could have done a slightly better job differentiating them, but for the most part, I'm really proud of the cast we have and the performance they did.
I can't see it. I can't see it. I can't see it. I can't see it.
When you look at the casting of Rasta as Gus, we were kind of watching the videos of the previous work that this guy had done. He'd done these crazy kind of football player commercials and whatnot, and we're sitting there thinking, wouldn't it be fun to go to war with that guy? And we cast him kind of as stunt casting. It's just kind of like, this would be crazy, this would be cool. And the character was already built, and he had arms that were, they were decent size, right? He had some pythons in his arms, but once we really got the voice in there, we realized this guy needs some guns on his arms. I mean, he doesn't just need a Lancer gun. He needs, got tickets to the gun show type guns. And the arm size after that wound up tripling after we cast Rasta as Gus. The overall kind of design motif for Gears is kind of something old, something new, right? You have a bolt-action sniper rifle that's old, but it looks sci-fi, right? You have these characters that have these kind of sci-fi suits, but there's really not a lot of laser weapons in the game. We kind of knew we wanted to go old school with the music as far as, classical instruments of just strings and very much a orchestra that we could actually later record live. And I think the quality when you record live is just tremendous, and I think that comes through in the game.
Having the soundtrack or the score recorded by an actual orchestra, again, to me it adds to the credibility of a AAA franchise and the richness of the performance. I mean, much like having John do Marcus and you listen to him and there's something about what he brings to the character and meaningfulness and believability to it, I find that the orchestra recordings of our music change it completely to making it grounded in the world and real, you know, as opposed to some synthetic thing. It's just the orchestra strength. I mean, some of the tracks were like, I was personally a little, I'm not certain about this track at this particular moment and that kind of stuff. And then when Mike came back with the orchestra recordings and you listen to this music being played live, it completely changed it and made it real and made it legitimate. And I feel that's what I think that's doing for us too, is I think it's just raising the quality bar even higher on the franchise and on the product.
I hope Gears gives the players the feeling that they had as a kid when they would be afraid of something and then ultimately be empowered to kind of defeat it.
I hope they get an excellent gameplay experience. I hope they get floored by the visuals. I hope the gameplay is fun and they can revisit it often.
Ideally, when they play another game after this and you can't take cover or you can't do something in the game, it'll feel like it's missing something.
I want them to go and see this as something bigger than what it is, which is a game right now. I want them to look for bigger ways to explore it. I want them to be jazzed that they play it. I want them to be telling their friends. I want word of mouth to spread like crazy. I want people just to be, having that adrenaline rush after finishing and going like, I'm so satisfied that it was the right amount of time and the right amount of excitement and the right peaks and valleys of the gameplay, that it wasn't just, they don't go away disappointed, that they go away like, I spent $60 or whatever it's going to be on that, and it was well worth the money and I'd do it again.
If we can have people participate at a level where they walk away still talking about it, then we've certainly achieved everything that we've kind of started out to achieve.
If people are sweating after they're done playing, we've done our job.
It's an enjoyable, beautiful, exhausting cinematic experience, and I think people are going to like it.